Sing songs of joy, sing songs of gladness. To every nation sing songs of joy. Sing songs of people, sing to every nation sing songs. To every nation sing songs of joy. To all the people, to every nation sing songs of gladness, sing songs of joy. Lift your voices all together, lift them up in harmony. Join hands, believe in each other, one community. Lift your voices in harmony. Join hands, believe in each other, one community. Sing songs of joy, sing songs of gladness. To every nation sing songs of joy. Sing songs of people, sing to every nation sing songs of gladness, sing songs of joy. To all the people, to every nation sing songs of gladness, sing songs of joy.
What an appropriate song for this morning. So joyful to be back in our sanctuary, back in person, and also live. So welcome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lori Bodie, and it's a privilege for me to serve on your board of trustees. The pronouns that I use for myself are she and hers. This is my third year serving on the board. This year I'm serving as past president and have been very involved in the ministerial transitions process. So welcome, welcome, welcome to those of you watching online and everyone here in person. We are so excited to be here for this service. I'd like to draw your attention to a few of the things that were in your latest e-news that was sent out this past Thursday. So right after this service at 11:30, please join me, along with several board members and members of the Interim Minister Search Committee in the lower level. We'll be in the lower level. I think my message said the sanctuary, but we have something else going on in the sanctuary. So we'll be in the lower level gathering area from 11:30 to 12:30 to talk about the ministerial transitions process. So please join us if you have any questions about how did we get here, where are we in the process, and what are our next steps. Please join in. If you can't join live, there is a Zoom link that was in the e-news. So go ahead and join by Zoom if you can't be here in person. Also, do you miss seeing your UUCW friends? During the past, yes, I heard a resounding yes, okay. Yes, all right. So, during the past 2 years, we've been mostly a virtual church community, and we've missed the chance to be together in ways that have deepened our hearts and spirits. So, fellow member Kristen Fuel shares this quote: "Talking at our cottage meeting reminded us of what we've really been missing. May our pledge for the 2022-23 year help us revitalize our dreams and hopes for what UUCW can bring to our lives, to our community, and to our world." So, an update from the Stewardship Committee. Thank you to those of you who've responded to our call to register for one of the UUCW cottage meetings in our month-long annual pledge drive. However, If you've been trying to register this week and are getting an error message, it's not you. It's not user error for the first time. It's not user error, okay? It's not. What a relief, huh? So the stewardship team had to postpone some of the meetings while they needed to work with some of the hosts and others to come up with a new schedule that works for everyone and will better meet all of our needs. So please just hang on. Just hang on. We're still having them. They'll still be there. We're just changing a few of the dates. So please look in the e-news announcements this coming week for a new schedule and a new link to sign up. So thank you in advance for doing that. Also, if you are new here, if you're a visitor, or you haven't heard from us, even though you've sent us something, and you checked your spam folder, if you have Gmail, it like automatically goes to spam or social or something like that. Or even if you just have a question of some sort, please drop us an email and tell us a little bit about yourself. Including your contact information will make it a lot easier for us to get back with you. We would love to hear from you and hear what you're seeking and what you need. So please email us at visitor@uucw.org, and we promise we'll get back with you. We promise. And again, that's visitor, visitor, @uucw.org. So we gather together today to strengthen one another and continue to form this beloved community here at UUCW.
Thank you, Lori. Guess what I got today, Lori?
What?
I got people for my birthday. It's the best present that I can have a real audience of people, congregants, friends, ready to make connections. I'm so excited. I'm Reverend Denise Cawley, and my pronouns are she and her. And today we will explore a topic inspired by leadership in nature and using behaviors that mimic birds and bees and plants and teach us how to change culture, which is something I keep getting asked about here. How do we do it? I'm telling you today. It builds on our emergent strategies service we had a few weeks ago. If you missed it, go back and watch on YouTube. I want to deeply welcome you because whoever you are, wherever you come from, you are welcome here. Whomever you love, however you define family, you are welcome. And the identities you hold, how you want to be called, and the pronouns you choose are respected and welcome here. Whatever the color of your skin, the language your grandparents and great-grandparents spoke, the cultures that move in your being, the abilities and disabilities you hold, we welcome you. Whatever you believe, whatever your theology, your prayer, your sacrament, even if none at all, we welcome you. We unite here in Unitarian Universalist principles. We are a community of communities. There's lots of communities that come together here. We are spiritual seekers acting, doing our faith in ways that call us to justice, and we unite all of those diverse beliefs and identities into how we act in covenant with one another. That is what we call the spirit of love, and love fuels this church. We welcome all of your bodies and your wounds. We invite you to set some of those wounds down today and open your heart, because all of you, all of yourself is welcome here in our service of love.
So our chalice lighting reading is Hymn to the Light by David Breeden. So if you're at home, please kindle your chalice. And for all the rest of you, the words are in your order of service, so please read along with me. Our light is the light of the sun, keeper of all we love. Our light is the light of the earth, provider of sustenance. Our light is the light of all living things, life precious like our own. Our light is the light of each of us, bound together in need and hope. Our light is the light of the cosmos, keeper of all we know.
Here we have gathered side by side. Circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Good morning. I'm Dave Cicero, Director of Lifespan Religious Education here at UU Church West. My pronouns are he and his. So I started there with the front cover of a book called One Dark Bird by Liz Garton Scanlon and illustrated by Fran Preston Gannon. I'll get back to the bird in just a minute or two, but first I have a question for you. Do you ever feel like you're a little fish in a big pond of life? That can be overwhelming, especially if you've ever felt like the pond is so big that you'll never get around to being able to know or explore the whole thing. Even more frightening can be when you feel like there are bigger fish out there too, looking to get you, always chasing after you and making you miserable. Who wants to get eaten up by a bigger fish before they've had a chance to grow up and become a big fish? But not all of us are destined to become big fish. Some fish are small compared to others, but that doesn't mean they need to feel vulnerable because they can work together. A teachers' union was where I first saw a picture like this one. It shows that if all the little fish just work together in a coordinated and organized way, they could be powerful enough to no longer feel threatened by that big fish. They could now have some control over what happened in that big pond. Now, a real school of fish actually looks something more like this. Not like a big fish, but certainly something I'd be careful approaching when underwater. That looks really powerful. Nothing to mess around with. Now, in a movie I really liked called Finding Nemo, the two main character fish become lost, but meet up with a school of fish that communicates in its own special, organized way. The individual fish in the school don't talk like the others in the movie, but instead shapeshift, visually answering questions that Dory and Nemo's dad have about what direction they ought to take if they want to find who they're looking for, Nemo. Now, to do this, these little fish need to work together. No single fish can create those complex shapes themselves. Today, we are thinking about this need of working together for ourselves and how we can't really accomplish big things in our lives without the help of others around us. Now, back to birds, which can also illustrate this idea of needing to work together to accomplish wonderful things. 1. Dark bird. Perched way up high, a view of town, a taste of sky. Now, a single bird doesn't make a whole flock, not even 2 or 3 or 6, but many. And not until they've gathered together with a purpose does the flock start to act as one unit. Now, have you ever seen an actual flock of birds moving together in unison? This is a really big one. Amazing. Mesmerizing, isn't it? The whole flock appears to be one large organism, which I guess it kind of is. Only it's easy to forget that this is a big group of little birds, starlings, whose movements all appear synchronized. They look as if they're all planned out ahead of time, except they're not. High-tech photography like this has allowed scientists to take a close look at individual birds within a murmuration, the word used to describe this magical phenomenon. So it turns out that each bird does not need to understand the whole big picture. Each one simply pays attention to only the 7 birds right around itself, adjusting its own flight right in that moment so as not to run into any of the starlings next to them. Only when these individual birds choose to participate in a whole that is greater than they can even begin to sense or understand does the magic happen, until the need for this magical dance, which is to catch food or avoid being caught by a larger bird and become its food, goes away. When they can again rest peacefully. And what does this mean to you and me? Well, we're like the fish or the birds, doing our small parts to add to the magical harmony of the whole community. The work we do in the world, the way we love the 7 people around us, the way we stick to our principles, the way we try to live our values, the way we choose to make our faith a way of life rather than a way of thinking, all matters tremendously. And now, as the starlings gathered at church today, flock together to find their way to the religious education classrooms, we sing them out with love and with joy. As you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go, as you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go.
Good morning. I'm Lynn Broaddus,
And I'm Mark Gorlick.
and we are joining you here from our home in Minneapolis, and it's great to be here with you this morning. We want to share with you a little bit about how we think about giving to our church. And, it's been an evolution for us. We've been members of UUCW for 22 years now, almost 22 years. And before that, we were members of a church in Wilmington, Delaware for 7 years. And now we are also members of a church in Minneapolis, where we have lived for the last 5 years. But, for us, it's been an evolution. I remember very well when the first time we were approached about giving in a serious way, and we were young, our kids were still both in daycare, we were barely making ends meet between the costs of daycare and commuting and a mortgage that was kind of a stretch for us, paying off student loans, all the things that people in our age group at the time were dealing with. And we were approached by our church at the time to give at a level that really kind of astounded us. Now that we look back at it, it wasn't much at all, but to give at even a 1% of our income level just seemed like such a stretch to us. But we realized that we needed to step up to the plate. Who else was going to do it? So we did the best that we could, but it certainly wasn't as much as maybe some had hoped. But as the years went by, each year we tried to give a little bit more, and certainly our church became, and UUCW in particular, became more important to us and to our family. But I think a real change and shift for us came probably about 15 years ago, when we really started to think about our giving as one of our spiritual practices. It's not just something that we think about after all the other money that we spent and what's left over and what can we give to the church. Instead, we put it first and foremost in as we're thinking about our money and what our needs are. Our church is, and these days our church are really, really important to us. So we budget for that up front, and we think about it as a fundamental part of our giving. And we don't think about it as something that is being extracted from us. We really try to think about what will feel good to us, what feels like is a meaningful contribution, that if our friends and family looked at us in our situation, they would say, yeah, that feels good to them as well. So that's kind of how we think about it overall. And
So we moved here 5 years ago, actually 5 years ago today.
oh,
When we moved here, we
Yeah.
realized we wanted to find a community and a spiritual home here. But of course, UUCW was still our community and our spiritual home. We did eventually settle on a church here, and we've subsequently joined. But as we thought about UUCW, we really weren't thinking about, we weren't attending services there, and certainly when we first moved here, virtual services weren't a thing. But it still had a special place for us. It was a place where our kids grew up. It was a place that we grew up. It was a place that welcomed us when we first moved to Milwaukee. But we sort of thought about, we don't give to the church because of what we get from it. We give to the church because of what the church does. And it certainly does things for us, but it does things for the community. And I sort of think about what a hole would be left in the Milwaukee community if UUCW weren't there. And it would be a huge hole. UUCW plays such an important part, first of all, in providing a spiritual home for people like us, standing up for Black Lives Matter, for LGBTQ people, for all kinds of causes that we believe in, and it is a community asset. It's a resource for that community, and we feel like we should continue to support it because it was important to our existence. I think it's important to the existence of a community that we still care very much about. And so we have continued to be members and supporting members of UUCW.
And I will say that, of course, we also have a lot of really good friends still at UUCW.
Yes, we certainly do.
So we miss you.
And we miss you all.
But yeah, so when we make our pledge, we're not just making our pledge to the church. I mean, we are the church. Collectively, we are the church. We are making our pledge to you. And as you make your pledge, you're making it to everybody else and to us. And so we ask that you really, think about that in a deep way, and as you think about this year and years to come. And I will mention one resource that was really important to us years ago and continues to be a touchstone. You might go to a website, bouldergiving.org, and they have some interesting sort of materials that can help you think about that if that's something you'd like to contemplate. And I guess the last thing I'll add is that we made our pledge today,
Right.
which is Thursday that we're recording this. And we went to Realm, we logged into Realm. And it is so easy. This was the easiest pledging we ever did. So guys, just go to Realm and make your pledge today. Thank you so much.
Many, many years ago, my family of origin would ask what I was giving up for Lent. They had not accepted my UU faith and were sure that I was just a Catholic that forgot to go to church. When the person who was my wife then and I were first together, we lived on $7,000 a year. And I'm still not really quite sure how we made that work, even at what prices were then. We only bought meat occasionally because it was expensive. And many in my family thought we were vegetarians, which I really think was a nice way of them saying we were gay. Since Lent was supposed to be a time of sacrifice, is what I was taught as a Catholic, we would tell our parents that we were eating meat during Lent because that would be a sacrifice for us. This was probably the late 1990s. Now, decades later, I can articulate my theology, and I have a better idea about our UU history within world religion, and I can lift up traditions that I want to keep from my own history and from my faith's history, and I can jettison ones that do not serve me any longer. For years, I would see friends using this chart, hashtag UULent, on Facebook and Instagram. And I like it so well now that I included it in the e-news last week. And I've seen a few of you doing it. And over time, I also learned about the concept of 40 days is found in many, many cultures and faiths. Some cultures mourn for 40 days after a death. Some have a baby moon where for 40 days they don't leave their bed and women wait on them after they've given birth. In fact, the number 40 is found in so many religious traditions without specific explanations. It's often really just a way of describing a long time or a large number, 40. 40 is used so often in Christian scriptures, often what I had been taught as a child was called the New Testament or the Christian Bible, as well as in Hebrew scriptures, previously known as the Old Testament, 146 times. The number seems to point to a completed time of trial and testing for important events. Now, in UU minister land, we'll go, oh, you're having your 40 days right now, you know, like you're going through a really hard time. You're having your 40 days. So Muslims share the importance of the number 40 as well. Some pagan traditions believe that 40 is the number of days after death that a soul wanders. In Judaism, the importance of the number 40 is also lifted up. It's a number that points to completion, contemplation, and transformation, each day building upon another, like today's theme about building blocks and tessellations that can turn into a murmuration. This year I am following that UU Lent hashtag on social media. If you type in hashtag UU Lent, you'll see thousands of posts, which I think is a cool way to participate in a spiritual practice with UUs I don't even know. There's a chart, and the chart gives you a theme for each day, something you can contemplate on, or take a photo of, or do a piece of art, or meditate or pray on. I think it's a really wonderful way to focus a spiritual practice for me. I've been drawing and posting photos of my UU Lent focus. And if you do the same, I'd love to hear how you're doing it. If you're looking at it as a practice, that chart is also at facebook.com/UULent. You can find it out there. It was created by Mr. Barb Grieve, who's now ordained, but he's one of our well-known religious educators in our faith, and he was the co-moderator. Do all of you know that in UU land, because our faith is registered in Boston, they don't allow you to have a president of the board? They call them moderators. It's a legal thing in Massachusetts. So when you hear UU moderator, they were the board president of the whole UUA. So some engage during Lent as a time of self-denial. And this practice is one engaged in a spiritual discipline of deep invitation and intention for appreciation of your world and things like that. So it's an openness to grace. Now, I'm going to tell you another secret about me. The UU church that I spent most of my time in before becoming a minister or getting into UU leadership was so humanist that I had no idea that our UU faith comes out of Protestant Christianity, right? This is funny to me now, but I didn't know it. I had no idea. I never heard the word Lent. And I know some of you are feeling allergies right now as I speak this. But I think it's important for us to know our history and think about the intention of it, this time of 40 days, this period of reflection. I was really surprised when I was in seminary and I was doing research in the archives, and I wanted to look at UU World back in the day, but it wasn't called UU World. It was called the Christian Register. And I combed those periodicals and archives at Meadville Lombard Theological School, working on research projects, just fascinated by the juxtaposition of what I knew as Unitarian Universalism and how it looked over 100 years ago. And really looking at ways that they talked about this wonderful prophet, Jesus. They then didn't believe that he was the only prophetic figure or that, but they really held him up as important and an important figure for us to learn from. So with that in mind, I can think about Lent in a new way now. And so it's a way that I can access spiritual practice and prayer. And whether you identify as a Christian or an atheist, a Buddhist, a Jewish UU, a pagan, a religious naturalist, a humanist, an atheist, I said that one already, or some other theological identity, I encourage you to take a look at this concept of 40 days. Perhaps you have some inner work of 40 days, and it might be time for you to have a UU Lent too.
Emergent strategies is a term coined by Adrienne Marie Brown with a book of the same title, Emergent Strategies. Adrienne Marie Brown is an author, activist, social justice facilitator, healer, and so much more. She has been a part of many of the most significant social movements in recent years, including Black Lives Matter and Occupy Wall Street. These movements teach us that organizing can be done in different ways than we are used to thinking of leadership. Come with me on a journey today as we explore emergent strategies and how we can look at nature to guide us in our leadership work that we have to do together. In Brown's Emergent Strategies, we look to how we can be fractal in our organizing, fractal in our leadership, because we are all pieces of the larger whole that we dream of. Our churches are fractals, our homes are fractals. And a fractal is an object or quantity that displays itself similarly like these pine needles. It looks roughly the same at any scale. Small-scale solutions impact the whole system. How can we ever dream a world of peace and tranquility if we don't have it on the smallest fractal? We have to start small with ourselves. We are building in scales. Murmuration. Starlings' murmuration consists of a flock moving in sync with one another. They engage in clear, precise movements, never hitting one another, never colliding, but instead they have this deep trust of one another. That trust is profound. And how do they know where they're going? They look to those closest around them. Join with us in a movement of synchronicity. Movements learn to go along at the speed of trust. Brown explains that her dream is a movement where there's such deep trust that we move as a murmuration, the way groups of starlings billow, dive, and spin, the same way that fish move. They are shoaling. Bees or other insects move this way, and they are swarming. Can we move at the speed of trust? Water is versatile. Water can be big and powerful. It can quench thirst. It can be healing. It always finds balance. We too are seeking emergent leadership in our Unitarian Universalist movement. In Brown's work, we learn that leadership collaborates. It's fecund. It moves in a juicy way that it starts at these little fractals and it grows up, and there's so much deep coordination. They are like hummingbirds and flowers. They come together because they need each other for survival. And we can be this vibrant and successful if we too move along in such coordinated collaboration. In today's sermon, you will get a taste of emergent strategy, and hopefully this will be a theme in our year as we go through learning together that small is good and small is all. We don't have to be big elephants. We can be tiny starlings. Change is always constant. Be like the water that we've heard about this year. Know that there is always enough time for the right work. And the conversation that's in the room when you meet with people, that's the only one that's possible at that particular moment. Find what is the good of you all working together. Remember, there's never a failure. Life is always a lesson. Brown asks us to remember that we have to trust people, and people we trust become trustworthy. And that's how we move at the speed of trust. We are focusing on critical connections. That's why we have coffee hours. That's why we have teas. That's why we have committees. We are working together to build resilience, to get good at change, to be more active in our doing and less worried about perfection. Remember to pay attention to what you care about. That is what will grow. Fractals are building blocks of larger movements. Fractals could be like Legos, especially those symmetrical ones. Emergent movements are how we create cultural change. Cultural change is fueled by a combination of spiritual practice and prayer, meditation, nature. God is change, education and learning. And all of those together build together to make micro movements. And micro movements make larger movements. If you attend UU events, you'll often hear about the UU movement. And many of us see this as a movement for peace and justice in the world. Today we're naming micro movements as fractals. And those fractals can build together into those murmurations. I'm giving you a little formula today for both your personal, your professional, and your congregation life that can deepen your spirit and make you far more impactful in that justice work you love, as well as in your deeper relationships and how you want to change the world. Are you ready? Step 1. Spiritual practice is a step in your fractal movement. A block you need to build yourself up to be in relationship with others is spiritual practice. Those fractals will then create those shifts in culture. Fractals are the relationship between small and the large and how we build a new world and a new church, how we build the church back up, I keep hearing people talk about, how we have a better relationship with our spouse or our children. So what are your spiritual practices? And I give you permission right now to write it on your order of service or type it into your phone. Think about what are your spiritual practices. And if you don't know what a spiritual practice is and you think it's a hobby, go review last week's sermon on our YouTube channel. Kelly works really hard to make all the sound and everything all perfect and beautiful. The YouTube channel videos are wonderful to get into. Spiritual practices have a really essential word in them, practice. It means you're not perfect at it all the time or already. Now, some of you have spiritual practices. And some of you, I ask regularly, what's your spiritual practice? I do a bunch of stuff. And some say, well, I do X or Y, Z for work, or I take care of my mom, or I care for my grandchildren, or I used to meditate. Sadly, none of those are spiritual practices. They might feed your spirit. They might be the kind of things you need to survive. But they're not actually the kind of practice that lets your mind let go and be fed. And you need to be fed to do the work. If you're one of the people coming up in leadership in this congregation or even in your family, if a matriarch or patriarch, or I don't know what the gender neutral term for that is, I'll have to ask Alex Capitan. But if you're a leader in your family or your work or your social justice work or your community or this congregation, you need spiritual practice. It's how I get ready to come do service. It's how I get ready to write the sermon because I want to make sure I'm giving you the messages you really need. I've heard a lot of people say you want more spirituality in your congregation. And so I'm asking you, and you can write this down too, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? Because I've noticed it means something different to almost everyone. I'm going to pause a minute while you think about what does spirituality mean to you?
People here love talking about how UUCW is very active out in the community. And yet people who are active in the community often get burnt out because they don't have a spiritual practice. And so if you like how much justice work this congregation has done, then I ask you to think about, if you haven't read Widening the Circle, to go read it, because Widening the Circle was our congregational read this year. We just finished it, but you can still read it. And in that we learn that we have to study UU theology, we have to do spiritual practice, and that's what then fuels us to go attend trainings, to write to representatives, to participate in protests. We need that. Without the practice, we become tired and not our best selves. We get exhausted from just giving. And so for care and loving ourselves and our families or this community, you need practice. A friend of mine was saying this week that she's realized that if she spends a half hour playing piano, she gets at least an hour and a half of like peak energy after. That spiritual practice somehow makes time more efficient, more fulfilling, makes you sharper. You get more done faster. Changing yourself in small units will change the world. Repeating those units, those tessellations, helps you build a practice that fulfills not only you, but helps you get ready to move culture. Maybe now is the day you start a prayer practice. One of my mentors that just passed away got up every day at 5 a.m. to pray and meditate, another UU minister. And she was one of the most productive, impactful people I've ever met. Doing something once a week is not a practice, it's more of a hobby. It's not bad, but it's just not a practice. Once a month is not enough to have those building blocks of tessellations. Next up, you need group spiritual practice. If you are searching for a deeper, more spiritual life in your congregation, I wonder if now is the time to join or start a soul circle, to explore Wellspring. We just had another short-term one come up, and it's already all filled up. We can have more. We just need leaders. We can start any of those anytime. Now is the time to sign up for Beloved Conversations. That's a great thing to do and lets you practice anti-racism as well as spiritual practice in a group. Because a lot of times we think we're supposed to be perfect already. No, we're not going to get there by just reading a book. We have to go practice. The deadline's fast approaching for that. Many even repeat that every single year because it grows their spirit so much. And I say that because in emergent strategies, we do things in small units, and then they build up to the larger whole. How we are at the small scale, Adrienne Marie Brown says, is how we are at the large scale. We aren't going to suddenly lead a protest that changes the law, that changes culture all at once. No. We're at the meeting, we're figuring it out. I invited you all Tuesday night, there's a meeting, how to help combat the anti-trans 101, class for all the anti-trans gender bills and anti-LGBT bills that are out there, and how we're not supposed to say gay in Florida, right? Because somehow if we say it, everyone will be LGBT. So I'm just going to say it here, you're all converting instantly, right? Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer. Suddenly you all are, right? No, of course not. That's silly. But we have to learn how to be together, learn how to build that trust, learn how to move at the speed of trust. And so then we can have those patterns that are fundamental in the universe, like you saw in that video that I made and then Kelly made look way better. Right? You'll see how that builds. So find your spiritual practice, recommit if you have needs to do that. Take your spiritual practice here in a group. We have a weekly meditation group. That one meets during the day. Need one at night or on the weekend? Offer to start it. Okay, we're ready to be back in person. And you're going to see more and more restrictions lifting, right? As the CDC continues to lift different guidelines. So you're practicing spiritual practice on your own. You're doing it in the congregation. And then you can start to echo in waves. We have a new Christian affinity group starting for those of you who believe in God. Some people are interested in that. Some people are interested in the sewing and quilting groups, right? Or reading books on spirituality and having shared discussions. Those are ways we tessellate. Now, in last week's sermon, I said to you, remember that a lone practitioner, Thich Nhat Hanh says, is an ex-practitioner. You have to do it in community, or you won't have that support. So we're not chasing you out of the building today. You can go up to people afterwards and say, will you be my spiritual practice check-in buddy? Okay, I need you to come after me. You text me, ask me if I'm doing it. Next, we need readings and podcasts and classes and learnings, because those are building blocks too. And that's how we also put into practice that 8th principle that we affirmed a few years ago, right? We're waiting for the whole Unitarian Universalism to affirm it or to write a version of it or whatever they're doing. You can ask me about that if you're interested in where that's at. But we've affirmed the 8th principle, the anti-racism, anti-oppression principle. And so we need to practice that too and continue to practice it. I keep taking classes in it. I've gotten better. I have a lot to learn too. Now the video, we just learned about murmurations, right? And Dave's story today talked to us about murmurations. And these are keys to changing culture. We just have to learn to have that unit of about 7 around us, right? And those small groups tell one another, and that's how it builds. I love this quote by Toni Cade Bambara, and she says, we must make just and liberated futures irresistible. Do you know what she says is one of the keys? Artists. So it's not this like way of left brain thinking where everything must be words on the page, right? No. That's why when you see a lot of different programs we have in Unitarian Universalism, we incorporate music like we do in service. We incorporate dance or drawing or just other ways to engage other parts of our soul because the movement needs to be irresistible, and fun's a part of that. And we need one another to do that. Now, Lynn Capitan isn't here, is she, Eddie? No. So one of our fellow congregants, Lynn Capitan, and I were talking yesterday about all the laws attacking LGBT people and the anti-trans laws being proposed. And I was telling her about this time that I practiced emergent strategy cultural change. I've done it many times in my organizing career and when I've been brought into organizations when they needed leadership or whatever. And one of the times was at Bradford UU, where I was serving, and they told me, we want a transgender ministry program. And I was like, what, are you sure? They were sure. They had it in their strategic plan long before I got there. They were like, that's your project. So in that project, I planned for a long time. I planned with the staff and the ministers and some of the leadership. And one of the components is that I brought in the Transforming Hearts collective curriculum. And that's something that Alex Capitan, who grew up in this church, co-wrote. And that was one of the components that we used. And that program looks at gender and sexuality with an intersectional lens. And you might be thinking, well, that's not really my thing. That's not my issue I care about. But the cool thing about this program is they didn't look at it just from a point of view of sexual orientation or gender identity. No, they looked at it intersectionally. And so we laid anti-racism, we laid environmental justice, and we laid prison ministry and all these different things on top of issues that impacted everybody in the congregation, right? We're all hot button issues. And that's what we do when we have an intersectional lens, which is really important to growth. I've been telling a lot of you that all the UU congregations that grow and get really, vibrant and big and have a lot of things that people wish we had, they make serious commitments to anti-oppression and anti-racism. they don't just make commitments, they make actions, and they do things, and they partner, and it's really exciting, right? So this program we were doing, we had this online class, we had speakers, I brought in different experts from the community, we watched movies, we had podcasts, we had all different things. We did a worship sometimes every month, sometimes every other month, the whole thing themed on that. And there we had also gone through a process where we went to all ages RE. And so we had once a month, we would have religious education for the whole congregation for about an hour and a half or so after service. It was really cool. So there we would do these all ages RE, and we would have them themed around this goal that Bradford had for our transgender ministry program. And we're kind of going along, and I mean, we've got Split the Plate dedicated to it, and we've got sermons and religious education. There's all this stuff. There's lots of little building blocks of tessellations happening. And I told Lynn, there was a moment, probably 18 or 20 months into it, where I thought, oh my God, is any of it going to make any difference? It was so hard. There were so many little things. I would be thinking that we were going along and getting somewhere, and then someone would say something that felt really hurtful, or something else would happen in the world and made us kind of lose our hope for a little bit. But we kept going. We're planting those seeds, building those tessellations. And then one day we'd done the worship service, and then we were in the after learning with all the different ages of people all together. And all of a sudden they all started kind of taking the questions that were posed in the small groups, and they were making bigger plans. And each group was working on something. One group's like, okay, we're taking on the website and all communications that go out from church. And another group's like, I'm going to go work with the school board on this. I'm one of the people who goes there. And someone else said, I'm going to go work with the aging commission in the county. And I sat there watching them, and they were getting louder, and they were starting to, flip charts were flying, and people were writing things down, and they were composing letters, and they were running back and forth in the room. They were starting the murmuration. And it was getting bigger than all those little things we had done. It was this cold day in January, and they were flying. And that process of going through cultural change was a great basis, because after I left, like within a week or so after I wasn't serving there anymore, is when all the stuff around Kyle Rittenhouse happened, right? And they were ready to be at the center of town, in the center of all of that work. You may recall they're the UU congregation that had Black Lives Matter on their sign, right? And it got set on fire and burned to the ground. And there were activists out there taking the UU church rain barrels and dumping them on the ground to try to make it wet around the church, right? And that church has continued on their cultural change journey and really working on anti-racism now. But they had been through a cultural change process. They owned that topic, and they were ready to swoop in and dance and work together in the center of that issue. Bless you. So there's a fractal nature to every communication we have. And so I always ask myself, what phrases do I want to reverberate in my family, in my community, in my congregations I'm serving? And I also have to stop and ask myself, am I really being true to that? I have to check myself. I have people I go check myself with. Hey, do I have too much ego going on here? Am I really serving the movement? Am I helping? Can you read this letter for me before I send it? Can you read this email? What type of community exists in my home all comes from the tessellations that I build. And in cultural change, we want to see little groups getting started, all sharing their idea. And with the birds, we see them just telling the 7 or so around them, right? Dive left, flutter right. They're doing it in ways we don't even know all of the ways they're doing it, right? Now, for those of you who love science, Margaret Wheatley's book called The New Science was based on her work with organizational leaders on what is most effective. But it uses a lens of quantum physics, biology, and chaos theory. And her key learnings was that everything is about relationships. You know, some of you have heard me say my favorite tool for conflict management is picking up the phone. Right? It's not sending another letter, it's picking up the phone. Hey, this is going on, or that was an ouch for me, or did I really understand this? I got an email the other day and I was like, I'm missing something, because I want to get really mad right now with what I'm reading, but there must be something I'm missing. And indeed there was, right? And we talked, but I gave that person the opportunity to clear that up for me, right? And correct me and educate me and share their truth with me. So we're looking for ways to have organizational success, and vision is this invisible field that binds us together, emerging from relationships and chaos and information, right? So there's gonna be chaos in our process sometimes. We're gonna make one decision and then go, oh, that wasn't quite right, I'll make another one. But if everything's about relationships, and our goal is caring, just like the way the starlings in our sight are our vision, right? And if we say our family and our friends and our work and our church, that's our 7 things we're tracking, right, in front of us, and our self. If that needs units to bind us together into new patterns, every wave, every communication makes another wave, right? Every part of our relationships. And so that's how we go from being a tessellation to a murmuration. And so our next step in this process is mimicking these flying, buzzing creatures, right? So in emergent strategy leadership, the sum is much bigger than the parts. And so often I hear, I want something so badly, but I can't even imagine how it could happen. I want us to be this diverse congregation with tons of families joining, and I want diverse people here, and I want more diversity, and I want more people coming, and I want more groups, and I want more opportunities, but I can't even imagine it. In emergence, you won't be able to imagine it all because it's more beautiful than you can ever imagine. It's going to be better if we can keep building trust with one another, build on relationships. So I keep hearing people say, how do we possibly change the culture at UUCW if it's so big? And I hear you. As someone who has tried to get to know you for a year, masked up with sunglasses and hats if I've seen you at all, and none of you have your pictures in Realm hardly, right? I'm trying really hard. I hear you saying this about anti-racism a lot. You really want us to live into that anti-racist congregation. What does that look like? How do we get the whole congregation on board, in their hearts, making it their personal journey? How do we even know if we're doing things that build up white supremacy culture if we swim in it, right? We all are swimming in it. Doesn't matter what your identity is, we're swimming in it because we're products of colonialism. We have to break it down. We have to start with ourselves, spiritual practice, group spiritual practice, getting learning, getting trainings, doing all those things. Those are all little units. Because I see you all like my favorite oak trees. Oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold on tight. There's no like strategic planning meeting, right? I don't think they're having cottage meetings even, but for us, that's going to be a relationship builder. We already have seen it where we've had them already, where people go, oh my gosh, Oh, I get it. Oh, I never knew this. Oh. That's why I want you to come to them. It's going to be fun. The ones we've had so far have been fun. And our congregation needs that support of one another. Because those oak trees, they create this system that is resilient on sunny days and in hurricanes. And our congregation, our families, our friends, we need to come together and support one another on our spiritual journeys. And some of you do a lot of that, and some of you might need an invitation. So help one another along. Most of the hardest conversations that we think about that are going to be really hard are because we haven't started them yet. The scary part is before we start hard conversations to go deeper into our relationships. And once you start them, if you can start from feelings, I feel scared to talk to you. I feel afraid to bring this up. I feel worried about what's happening. Then you offer an invitation to someone else to respond in kind. And we have a really kind congregation. We're smart. We have wonderful people here to learn from, to help us with our families. We have lay pastoral care to help us. You have me, and you have the great staff, and you have each other. And if you don't know each other yet, come to something, right? Small groups are how you get to know the larger whole. We can't imagine the new way because we are trying to imagine something in all the little parts without building the tessellations. If we are each focused on making our little areas, ones that we work in, things that can echo out, then we will have blocks to build with. You know, I'm watching nominating committee do what they can to build some new blocks, right? And they have a bunch of wonderful leaders coming on. And I'm watching the art team say, well, which things should we do first? Do some things, right? Just try to start building some blocks. I'm watching the worship team do things to start to build blocks differently and think very carefully about how they can build more blocks. I saw the pastoral care team do it with their new policies, right? There's lots of ways we can do this. But to do it, we have to feed our spirit. You know, before you go to that next meeting or family gathering, meditate for a little bit first, right? Or whatever your spiritual practice is. Because in order to dismantle white supremacy, in order to dismantle colonialism, in order to build environmental justice, we have to be centered and practicing things. And churches and synagogues and community centers are places where we can love each other up while practicing these concepts and trying them on. I hear people say, well, we already tried that, or they made their decision, or I heard someone fretting, well, if I would have known that, I would have done such and such. I know it's frustrating. But of course you would have if you would have known that, but you didn't. Because in a culture designed by colonialism, we are forced to try to guess everything perfectly. And if we don't guess right, we might not even act, right? Because we're so afraid of not getting it right. In emergent strategies, everything is data, and nothing was wasted. There was a reason for that. And now in murmuration, we can course correct. We can move together in the chaos and then go other directions. In emergent systems, we can adjust. In this culture, the first person you can adjust and change is yourself. And if you change you, you can help change that around you. So I give you permission to try again. We can reroute. We can take new directions if we have more information. Nothing is wasted. Nothing's a failure. Emergence is a system that makes use of everything in iterative processes. Transforming our relationship with the natural world is something more reciprocal
That's how it becomes more just. We are tessellations building the great murmuration. The collective includes all beings with transparency and trust. Some days are already gone, and I invite you to look beyond. Look into your family and your friends and your church and enact this, because it happens to you now. The time is now. We are all related, interconnected, and this is your invitation to emerge in your relationships. Because this world, these bodies here in our church, those out there in the internet land, we are all a big system, and nature sees no lines dividing us because we are all dependent upon one another.
Off key here, I have a suggestion. I think it's someone's birthday. Reuben, do you think we should play a tune? All right. Okay, back on key. I'm Pat Ryerson, and I'm a member of UUCW Split the Plate Committee. And this morning, I have the honor of welcoming Alejandra Gonzalez, who is the Development Director at Voces de la Frontera. As a DACA recipient and someone who has experience navigating the world undocumented, the work that Voces does is not just personal, but vital, absolutely vital for herself and for others in her community. Alejandra, tell us about Voces.
Thank you so much for having me here this morning and for choosing Voces de la Frontera as your Split the Plate recipient. I don't know that I would be here without the work that Voces has done and with people like you that have supported our mission. Voces was essential in winning DACA for young immigrants like myself. We are currently working on acquiring driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants and securing workplace safety measures for essential workers throughout the state. In addition to that, we provide English and citizenship classes through our New American program and leadership development opportunities to students in our Youth Empowered in the Struggle program. I can go on and on about the work that Voces does, but our time is limited. So if you have any questions or would like additional information, I have brochures available, and I am open to any questions after the service. Thank you.
And as you know, you can support Voces de Frontera in various ways: texting, going to our website, or just plain old everyday mail. Thank you.
So exciting, right? Thank you for all you've shared today. You can always go back and share more. They are our Split the Plate recipient for the month. I have to tell you, for years, I did all kinds of organizing for women's health, for the right to vote, for tons of LGBTQ causes. And did I already say women's health? Lots of great stuff, right? Voces de la Frontera was always the first nonprofit to partner. And I just love that about them. And so I always felt like I would show up for their stuff, and leaders in the community, like I just always felt like there was a home for Unitarian Universalists and progressive people with VOSes. So I'm delighted they're our recipient this month. I want to remind you that we're going to do the receiving line, and you'll get to ask more about VOSes. I know some of you are going to ask about my foot, and so I'm just going to tell you now that I had a really serious ankle surgery, and I'm still healing, so I can't stand for really long yet. I'm getting there. So if I need to stand longer, we'll just bring a chair over there when we greet you after the service. But still healing, but doing so much better, and thank you for all of your love and prayers. Also, don't forget that the board is having their ministerial transitions meeting at 11:30 downstairs in the gathering area. It's on Zoom too. I resent you that link for that today. Soon there's going to be things like coffee, and we're going to need you to sign up and help. Because we like coffee. It's part of our Unitarian Universalist fuel. So don't forget about that. Watch your e-news, please. Joys and concerns, we have the slips of paper over there you can fill out, or you can always just email me, or there's a link every week in the e-news where it says joys and concerns, and it tells you what some of the joys and concerns are that people have offered to share publicly. So I know some of you have been looking for those. Take a deep breath. Thank you all for all the things you do to make this congregation possible. Your financial gifts, your time gifts. Thank you to Jim Milletta and crew who did all kinds of cleaning. You all did lots of stuff so that we could be ready. And Pat decorated the welcome table. And oh my gosh, the staff worked so hard. So thank you all for everything you've done. Consider the natural capacity for shared purpose, communication, and movement to embody what human beings might be capable of if we work together to address this perfect storm that's going on of racism and climate emergency, war, and the many ways that there are so many divisions of us versus them. Ignoring interconnection and our interdependent web that we are all a part of does us no good. Can we come together to make quick fractal patterns, transforming our relationship with ourselves and the natural world into something reciprocal, righteous, and transparent? I trust you and I believe in you. May it be so, and amen.